Hello everyone, and welcome back to another Heartsvine 4 Dev Diary. This week we have a relatively short Dev Diary, so keeping away from the 20+ minute videos, I'm going to try and speed it up as best I can, cover some important stuff, and talk about what we're all here to see, peace conferences. So let's head straight in. So Yaboy Bobby begins by talking about how this dev diary is a continuation of a previous dev diary which was initially opening up about peace conferences. I think it was during those sort of 2-week gap dev diaries, and I think I covered it on the channel, so you can go see some introductions there. But the long and short of it is there's going to be a new system entirely. In this rework there's going to be blind turns where everybody makes bids all at the same time, and then at the tick over of your turn, people will find out whether they got things they claimed or will have to continue bidding on highly contested options. And options I say because there are more things to do in peace conferences now than just take states or puppet things. Before jumping in, the dev diary clarifies that there was some jargon that was introduced in the form of demands and bids. Now all of these things will be referred to as demands, not bids, so think of it less like, I don't know, gambling or sticking bets on things in the hope you'll win it, and more so just you're demanding something very specifically in a peace conference, and the more demands you make for it, the more you're hoping that that's the primary thing you're going to get, assuming you've got the war score to win it. And with that, we get to see a relatively finished UI of the new peace conference, so let's have a look. So I think the most overt thing we're seeing here is that the countries who won are no longer on the left, they're on the right, and the countries that are defeated and are being divided up are now on the left instead of the right. So there's been a bit of an old switcheroo. I guess it makes sense that the side that has the demands on it should also have the countries you're demanding things from and all of that in one area, and the victors on the complete opposite side. In the top left we see the 9 demands that there are, which this dev diary is going to cover, as well as the different countries. Do we think that the numbers located next to the countries is states that they own? So you're betting for the states? Albania has 2 states as I recall, so it makes sense. More so than that, it also could be a representation of how many states there are left to claim in the peace conference. So if those states are taken, they will not be visible. That's because on the right side we also see that the winners with the current demands have 0 next to their green flags. So I guess that's states they've gained. It's all kind of up to conjecture and thought, but that's what I'm breaking down. At the top middle we see the bid phase, which is bid phase 1. Out of a total of 5 bid phases, what it looks like there's going to be, and each phase, this particular country, which I believe is the Soviet Union, is getting 1,041 points to spend on different things. So around 5,250 in total, which should be enough to get a decent chunk of Germany, maybe establish some kind of Warsaw Pact maybe. Another minor thing to talk about, and it's minor but it's interesting, is that in the top right we see that victors and beneficiaries have now been separated, which is kind of useful because if anybody remembers like carving up something like the British Empire, they had quite a lot of puppets if you started to liberate them and puppet them or whatever. So being able to just focus on the countries that won versus the countries that were sort of liberated or puppeted or sent to the side as beneficiaries is a nice little distinction to have. So moving on, we find out what some of those new buttons are going to be for the Make Demand section, and the first one we're going to be talking about is the Take Navy button. So we saw previously the Take Navy button in the dev diary covering the initial peace conference rework, but now we're seeing a more detailed version where instead of just taking the entire navy with a button, you're actually going to be bidding for capital ships within that navy. Different ships will be worth different amount of points depending on how strong they are or how many upgrades they have, and at the end all of the screen ships, the smaller ships, will be divided up against those who have claimed the capital ships. So the more capital ships you claim, the more, or should I say higher, the percentage of smaller ships that you'll get at the end. So they have given us an image to try and better show this. So the German Reich currently has 4 capital ships, so that's these 4 that you see here, and the Soviet Union is claiming 1 of those 4. 1 of 4 is 25%, and so as it says, the Soviets are going to get 25% of the screening ships from Germany because they're claiming 25% of all of their capital ships. This does raise one question though. What happens if you conquer a nation that has no capital ships? Is there a method to take their screening ships if they don't have any capital ships? Just a thought. Maybe it's covered somewhere else, but it's just something that popped into my head. Additionally, it also generates world tension to claim a ship. Just a interesting thought. I don't know why that's such a terribly evil thing. I mean, it's just a boat, but okay. Moving on, we also see the additional demands section, which is going to have some familiar favourites in the form of the puppets and changed government buttons. But previously, when you clicked these buttons, they would kind of work in a very ambiguous manner, and a puppet state would sort of be placed in any available state that it deemed the correct place to start it. Usually it would be the capital state, but if that one's taken, it could take some very peculiar positions. That's been changed so that now when you click to puppet or change the government, you have to specify the state where that puppet government is going to be placed to begin with. After that, I assume it's going to become a beneficiary, which we saw earlier, and you can choose to give more states to that beneficiary. But for now, you just have to click puppet, pick the state, and you're good to go. And remember, there was some level of agreement that there's going to be the ability to have multiple puppets. So Korea, which has a north and a south, possibly invaded by the Japanese and Americans at the same time, potentially having a government in the north and a government in the south. Just something to think about. But out with the old and in with the new, we have the form of the button of demilitarized zones. So if you didn't think that the Rhineland and the Turkish Straits were enough for you, you now can demilitarize, well, pretty much anything you want. Pick a state and stick the DMZ on it and you're good to go. Pretty good if you're planning a post-war war and you don't want the enemy to go after you, but it always made me wonder why you wouldn't have been able to annex them in the first place. Unless this is some sort of guarantee or push to say that annexing the entirety of the Allies with one quick war with Britain isn't going to be an option, which would be unfortunate, but I guess the world changes. In addition, this doesn't actually tell us how long the demilitarized zone works, or whether they're going to stick in some alternative, reworked version. I mean, as it stands right now, I know when Germany goes to war that the Rhineland gets remilitarized, regardless of anything. So I assume that's going to continue, that if a nation that has a demilitarized zone goes to war, that zone will no longer be demilitarized. But I'm wondering if there's a way for, let's say, a player to be able to remilitarize a zone that they've had to have demilitarized in a peace conference. I'm thinking specifically about like multiplayer scenarios. Just something to consider. Moving on from there, we reach the EU4 buttons in the form of resource rights and war reparations. War reps being the much more memorable one. Resource rights pretty much do exactly what they say on the tin. You pick the state and you get the resources within that state, while war reps is quite interesting in that it will give you full control of the local civilian factories in the state that you apply the modifier to. However, these are very specifically lasting for a period of time, which they haven't determined, so you won't be able to have control of all of the resources indefinitely, which I'm not sure. I do feel like if you went to the effort of, let's say, conquering somewhere, and you wanted to stick a mandate on that you went for the resources, it would be kind of annoying that there was, let's say, an arbitrary timer of 3 years, and then suddenly Germany's oil supply in the Netherlands, in Curacao or something, is just gone, because the arbitrary 3-year timer has just gone. So, I don't know. Maybe the timer thing, I'm not too much understanding, but I could see certain situations where it could apply. All in all though, I do think the buttons are pretty good, and I like the idea that there's much more options to have in peace conferences, especially beyond the concept of just World War II annex everything done. And finally, we have the final new demand, which is dismantle the military industry, which will remove the military factories from the targeted state. I would assume all military factories, with some rapid demilitarization to make sure that nobody gets up to any business. I think this is good. I think it's definitely within the vision of, as Paradox have said before, wanting to make the end of Hoi 4 feel like all the nations are like slowly getting back to normal. The troops are disappearing. But as it stands right now, even in a sort of 1946 world, everybody's like still on war economy, mass conscription laws, world tension is still at 100. So unless like those three things are really dealt with, it's going to be like a very minor setback to dismantle military options, because mills are one of the fastest things to build in the game. So if you had to pick between dismantling the military versus getting war reps, I'd go war reps every time, because they can build back those like mills instantly. But if they don't have civs to build anything with, then I think you're really screwing them up. So yeah, I think that this is pretty weak in general if they don't put attention on all the other aspects of the demilitarization post-wars. But in general, all of it is really good. I have nothing negative, just things that in general could be tweaked here and there and could use some more clarification. But that's enough from me and my ill voice. I said it was a short one, so let's keep it short. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you for listening. I thought this was interesting. I hope you find it interesting too. Next week it's going to be about modding. So, I wonder what modding changes they've got in store. I guess we'll find out. For the record, COVID is not fun. It's not fun at all. I do not recommend it. 0 out of 10. Bye.